Gabby is a lonely and sad woman. She had reached the point where the days no longer felt separate from one another. Morning came, then afternoon, then night, and somehow none of it seemed to matter. She didn't have a job anymore. She had been laid off months ago, and every attempt to find something new had ended in the same tired, humiliating ways: an automated rejection email, total silence, or an interview that seemed promising right up until the company vanished and never contacted her again. At first she had tried to stay disciplined about it. She updated her resume, wrote careful cover letters, checked job boards every morning, and forced herself to believe that if she just kept trying, something would eventually give. But nothing did. Her savings were shrinking, her apartment seemed to be falling apart around her, and the long, blank hours of each day had begun to smear together into one exhausting, colorless stretch of time. The apartment only made everything worse. It was small in a way that made it feel less cozy than claustrophobic, with thin walls, bad lighting, and a smell that never entirely went away no matter how often she cracked a window. The carpet was worn flat in some places and rough in others. The couch creaked whenever she shifted on it. The television was an old boxy thing with muddy colors and a tendency to lose sound whenever it pleased, but she kept it because it still worked with her VCR, and lately that mattered more than anything else in the room. Gabby didn't have much left that made her feel comforted, but she did have her old VHS tapes. Those had survived every move, every bad year, every moment where she thought about throwing everything out and starting over. Whenever the emptiness in her chest got too sharp, she would pull one from the stack beside the TV and slip it into the VCR like she was performing some tiny ritual she'd known her whole life. Disney movies, Don Bluth films, old Warner Brothers tapes, DreamWorks favorites, and VHS tapes of the shows she had loved as a kid. Pokémon, SpongeBob, Tom and Jerry, Arthur, Rugrats, Scooby-Doo, the Powerpuff Girls, Thomas, Wallace, and Gromit. They were worn and fuzzy and sometimes the tracking was bad, but none of that bothered her. The tape hiss, the faded previews, the warbling sound, the soft blur of old animation, those things soothed her in a way almost nothing else could. For a little while one of those tapes was playing, she could pretend she wasn't 20-something and broke and drifted. She could pretend she was still a kid and the world was still full of possibility. That was why evenings had become the easiest part of the day. She would sit there with a blanket wrapped around herself, the room lit only by the television, and lose herself in something familiar. It wasn't exactly happiness, but it was close enough that she clung to it. Once the tape ended and the screen went dark, though, everything rushed back in: the unpaid bills on the counter, the silence in her phone, the stale air, the awareness that nobody was expecting anything from her because nobody was thinking about her at all. Gabby hated how dramatic that thought sounded, but lately it felt true. The friends she used to have had faded out of her life so completely that she wasn't even sure when it had happened. Some had moved on, some had stopped replying, some had simply become strangers over time. There were days when she could go from waking up to going to sleep without hearing her own voice once. On the worst night she caught herself thinking that if she disappeared, it might take an embarrassingly long time for anyone to realize it. She tried not to dwell on thoughts like that. They scared her, not because they were loud, but because they were becoming so quiet and ordinary. So when she heard a knock at her door that evening, it startled her badly enough that she nearly dropped the VHS case in her hands. She sat frozen on the couch for a moment, staring toward the entryway while the old TV muttered softly to itself. Nobody knocked on her door. The landlord usually shoved notices under it. Maintenance only ever came if she called 3 times first. She certainly wasn't expecting company.
Hello?
She called, hesitant, like even speaking too loudly might scare whoever it was away. No response. The knock came again, quick and distinct.
Okay, I hear you.
She said under her breath, already getting up.
Geez.
Gabby found herself getting to her feet before she had fully decided what she was doing. She crossed the apartment carefully, half expecting that when she looked through the peephole there would be nobody there at all. When she opened the door, however, the hallway really was empty. No footsteps echoed down the corridor, no elevator dinged, no one was waiting by the stairwell. For one confused second she thought someone really had knocked just to mess with her. Then she glanced down and saw the package sitting squarely on her doormat. It was a small cardboard box, plain and unmarked, about the right size to hold a VHS clamshell.
It's just a box,
she said quietly, like saying it out loud might make it less strange. She bent down, picking it up. Gabby bent to pick it up and turned it over in her hands. There was no label, no shipping stamp, no name, not even a scribbled apartment number. It looked less like a package that had been delivered and more like something that had simply been placed there.
No label. No name. No nothing. That's not creepy at all.
She stood in the doorway for a second longer, scanning the hall one last time.
Real funny.
She added, a little louder.
If this is some kind of prank, it's not.
Her voice trailed off. Nobody was there.
Okay. Not funny.
She then stepped back inside and locked the door. Her pulse was still up from the surprise, but underneath the suspicion was something she had not felt in a while, curiosity. Maybe even excitement. It embarrassed her a little, how starved she was for novelty, how quickly her mood could lift just because something unexpected had entered her life that wasn't another bill or rejection. She carried the box to the couch, sat down, and opened it with more eagerness than she meant to show. Inside was a VHS tape and a plastic clamshell case. Gabby lifted it out carefully and looked at the cover. The title read Dandy's World Volume 1 in big cheerful lettering, and on the front was an anthropomorphic flower with rainbow petals and a bright, theatrical grin. The character looked posed in that exaggerated, welcoming way old children's mascots always did, one hand extended as if inviting the viewer into some colorful little universe where every problem could be solved in 22 minutes. Gabby assumed the flower had to be Dandy.
Dandy's World.
She read aloud, her voice quieter now.
Wow. That is aggressively cheerful.
Behind him were a few other cartoon figures she didn't recognize, all drawn in a style that felt strangely familiar without actually belonging to anything she remembered. The art had that soft, retro children's media look to it, simple shapes, bright colors, a kind of earnest sweetness that would have looked perfectly at home on a thrift store tape from decades ago. Gabby frowned, not because she disliked it, but because she couldn't place it. She knew old animation and old kids' media well enough that she could usually tell whether something was real, obscure, or imitation, and this somehow felt like all three at once. She opened the case and examined the tape itself before turning the clamshell over to read the back. The description was simple, bright, and vaguely enthusiastic in the way old home video blurbs always were, promising whimsical fun, lovable characters, and classic adventures for a whole new generation.
Whimsical fun, lovable characters, classic adventures.
She read aloud, then snorted softly.
Wow. That is aggressively corny.
Still, she smiled. It sounded corny. It looked corny too. But there was something appealing about that.
You're either gonna be really cute or deeply cursed, honestly. Either's fine.
Gabby was in no position to be picky about comfort, and the cover art had exactly the sort of low-stakes, cozy energy she usually craved from old media. More than anything, it felt like a relic from the same emotional neighborhood as the tape she already loved. She ran her thumb along the edge of the case and gave a small, tired laugh to herself. Maybe some random ghost of a forgotten cartoon was exactly what she needed tonight. It certainly beat staring at the ceiling and thinking too hard. She got up, crossed to the TV stand, and fed the tape into the VCR.
Please work.
She said softly.
I am begging you. I do not have the emotional bandwidth for another thing breaking tonight.
The machine accepted it with a familiar mechanical clunk, and that sound alone eased something in her. Gabby let out a small breath.
Thank you.
She settled back onto the couch, pulled the blanket over her lap, and watched the screen flicker into life. For a little while everything seemed normal. The television was filled with grainy previews and old-fashioned ads, the kind of odd filler that made a VHS feel more like an artifact than just a way of watching something.
Okay. Yeah. This is nice.
She murmured.
This is exactly what I needed.
She pulled the blanket tighter around herself.
Low stakes. No thinking. Just cartoons and bad tracking.
The colors were a little washed out and the audio wobbled faintly under the music, but that only made Gabby smile. It felt authentic. It felt comforting. After the previews ended, the tape cut cleanly to a screen that read feature presentation, dressed up in bright, playful colors. Gabby let herself relax against the couch cushions. For the first time all day, she felt that small, fragile sense of anticipation she used to get as a kid right before a favorite movie started.
Okay, Dandy.
She said.
Show me what you've got.
Then the screen went black. Gabby blinked.
Okay.
At first she thought it was part of the tape, some pause before the opening credits. She waited.
Oh. Okay.
Another few seconds, the black held for too long. The VCR still hummed. The TV still glowed.
Don't do this,
she said quietly. Nothing. She sat up straighter.
Don't you dare do this.
Nothing else happened. Gabby stared at it for several more seconds, waiting for an image, a song, anything at all, and when nothing came, her jaw tightened.
Are you kidding me?
She grabbed the remote, hit a button. Nothing changed. The disappointment that hit her felt absurdly sharp.
Of course.
She snapped.
Of course. Why would anything just work? That would be insane.
Even now, even with something as small and harmless as this, she couldn't just have one nice thing without it falling apart in her hands. She swore under her breath, threw the blanket aside, and got up from the couch with a surge of irritation that had been waiting all day for somewhere to go.
The tape's damaged, the VCR's dying, or both.
She snapped to the empty room.
Why not? Sure. Great.
Gabby said in anger. Her whole life lately felt like a chain of cheap, stupid failures, and for one irrational second this blank screen felt like one more personal insult.
You had one job.
She muttered, hitting the eject button.
One job.
The VCR clicked, whirred, and began to push the tape out.
Yeah, that's right, spit it out.
Instead of the VHS tape, a thick plume of strange, colorful mist burst from the slot. Gabby recoiled with a startled shout and stumbled backwards so hard she nearly fell.
Jesus Christ.
The mist poured out in twisting ribbons, not one solid color but several shifting through each other in soft, unnatural swirls. Pink bled into gold, blue into red, pale violet into something almost pearly white. It did not look like smoke exactly. It was too luminous, too saturated, too alive in the way it curled and drifted through the air. And it smelled sweet, shockingly sweet, like cotton candy and warm sugar, with something else underneath that she couldn't place, something soft and almost nostalgic, like the scent of an old toy chest left in the sun.
No, stay back, stay back.
Her voice broke, panic rising fast. Panic overtook her before she could make sense of any of it. She threw an arm over her mouth and nose, but she had already inhaled some of it, and the sweetness clung to the back of her throat in a way that made her stomach twist.
Oh God.
She choked, throwing her arm over her mouth.
What is that? What is that?
She coughed, scrambling backward as the mist spread.
This isn't real.
She gasped.
This isn't real, this isn't real.
But it was. Her heart began hammering so fast it hurt. She staggered away from the stand, hit the side of the couch, and half fell to the floor, staring up at the mist as it spread across the apartment in slow, curling waves.
Why is this happening?
She cried, her words tumbling over each other.
What did I do? What is this?
Every rational explanation her brain tried to offer collapsed immediately. Electrical fire didn't smell like this. Broken VCRs didn't spit out glowing clouds. Hallucinations didn't have texture, didn't move with this kind of horrible grace. Gabby could hear herself breathing too fast, could feel the beginnings of a tremor moving through her hands, and all at once her thoughts dissolved into one frantic, useless tangle. What was this? What had she put into the machine? Why had it come to her? Why was this happening? Why her? The questions slammed into one another faster than she could separate them, and as the colorful mist filled the room around her, Gabby could only sit there frozen in fear, feeling the sweetness in the air settle over her skin like the first touch of something impossible. The panic only got worse when Gabby felt a strange pressure building in her hands, not pain exactly, but a deep, wrong sensation, like something under her skin had decided it no longer wanted to stay where it was. At first she thought it was just her nerves, some wild bodily response to fear and whatever she had inhaled, but then her fingers twitched in a way that wasn't voluntary, and that illusion fell apart instantly. She pulled one hand away from her face and stared at it, and for a moment all she could do was look.
No, what is that?
The shape of it was changing, the whole hand becoming bigger and stranger by degrees that were subtle enough to watch happen and horrifying enough that her mind refused to keep up.
Hands don't do that.
Color shifted next. The familiar tone of her skin faded, a vivid, unnatural blue fuzz spreading across.
No.
She choked, rubbing at it frantically.
Get it off.
But it only thickened beneath her fingers. It got thicker and thicker until it was so fluffy. When she touched it again, her breath hitched.
That's fur?
It felt like fur, but it didn't feel like fur on animals, it felt like arts and crafts fur. Her stomach twisted.
But it's wrong.
She whispered.
It's not. Why does it feel like that?
Her fingernails were popping off, ricocheting everywhere. Gabby screamed.
Stop.
The tiny clicks of them hitting the floor sounded impossibly loud. Her fingers were widening at the ends, the joints smoothing out, losing the fine detail of knuckles and tendons, then pushed outward, lengthening into rounded claws of color red like crafted pieces rather than something grown. They didn't feel sharp. They didn't feel natural at all.
What is happening to me?
She whimpered. Gabby made a broken noise in the back of her throat and grabbed at that wrist with her other hand, only to realize the same thing was starting there too, only mirrored, red along one side, blue claws emerging against it. Her breath hitched so hard it hurt.
No, you don't get to do both.
She wanted to scream, wanted to demand an explanation from the empty room, but terror had broken her thoughts into fragments. She could only stare as her hands grew larger and rounder, losing their human lines and becoming something oversized, cartoonish, impossible. Gabby shook her head wildly.
This isn't real.
She insisted, her voice rising.
This is not real, I'm hallucinating, I have to be.
Her arms changed next, and that was somehow even worse. The sensation started in her forearms as a tightening, then a long pulling stretch, the stretching sensation hit, and she gasped sharply.
Ah. No, stop pulling, stop, this hurts.
She nearly pitched forward onto the carpet. She watched in disbelief as both arms lengthened well beyond anything natural, darkening as they did until they looked less like limbs and more like thick black cords wrapped in a smooth outer surface. They bent too easily when she moved them, curling and uncoiling with an unnatural fluidity that made her stomach flip. They were not thin, not wiry, but heavy and flexible at once, like cables brought to life.
Oh my God, my arms.
Gabby jerked one back and the other lashed loosely across the floor with a soft thump, the motion so foreign and yet so responsive that it made a fresh wave of panic break over her. She scrambled backward on her heels, trying to put distance between herself and the VCR, the mist, her own body, anything, but her transformed arms only tangled around her in a new length, as if she had suddenly been saddled with parts that belonged to someone else. The colorful fog still swirled through the room in slow, lazy currents, and that sweet scent kept hanging in the air, thick and warm, almost soothing in a way that made her angrier the more frightened she became. It was like the whole apartment had decided this was normal, while she was the only one left to understand how completely insane it was. Then the changes spread inward. Her shoulders shifted first, her shirt loosening awkwardly as her frame began to lose the proportions she knew by heart. It was not the sort of transformation she could even compare to weight gain or muscle or anything human. It felt more like her body was being simplified. Her breasts deflated and receded until they were completely sucked back into her chest, making it look like she never had breasts to begin with.
No, my breasts. How am I going to feed my hypothetical children if I am flat-chested now?
Her torso drew in and rounded out at the same time, slimming in some places, puffing slightly in others, all of it smoothing into a softer, more stylized shape. The planes and angles of a real human body seemed to blur away under her clothes. She clutched at the fabric in alarm as pale yellow-orange fur began to spread across her torso. She then felt some soft neck fluff grow around her neck, seemingly like a beige color. Gabby gagged on a cry.
Please stop, please.
She tried to scream, but her throat hurt too much. Her body losing the curves and becoming more basic and straight, losing her hourglass figure, causing her clothes to fall off, leaving her utterly nude, which would have mattered if her private parts didn't disappear mere seconds between the time her clothes fell off, leaving absolutely nothing between her legs.
Oh my God, I'm nude.
She shouted, not realizing her voice is distorting. She placed her hands on where her womanhood was supposed to be, only to find out it's been smoothed over. Gabby stared down at herself, disoriented by how unreal she looked.
It's making me into something,
she whispered. But even her voice betrayed her now. It came out softer, higher, boyish somehow, like it had been cleaned up and rounded off into something more expressive and less real. Not just changed. Stylized. The sound of it made her stomach drop and immediately covered her mouth. Her legs gave a sudden jerk beneath her, she cried out as she dropped to one knee.
Ah, not my legs too.
Beige fur spread across her legs and feet. She caught herself with those huge altered hands and then immediately regretted it, because the contact made the scale of everything even harder to deny. Her knees and ankles prickled, and she watched light yellow-orange bands appear there in neat little stripes, like decorative markings being added one after another. Her calves softened in shape, her feet shifting under her socks and shoes until the pressure became unbearable.
Get off, get off, get off.
She kicked her shoes off and peeled her socks off in a clumsy panic and stared as her toes merged into one mass on each of her feet, losing the toenails, and her feet rounded and simplified too, losing some of their human detail the same way her hands had, becoming smaller in proportion yet more distinctly stylized, as though designed to belong in an animated world where realism had never mattered in the first place. She pushed herself upright with effort, swaying badly, her two long arms hanging almost to the floor. Every movement felt delayed by a fraction of a second, not because her body was failing her, but because her mind still had not accepted its new dimensions. Her long arms dragged behind her. She glanced at them and flinched.
I hate those.
She said immediately.
I hate those so much.
She bumped into the side of the couch, caught herself again, and found herself absurdly offended by how naturally those strange limbs responded once she stopped fighting them. It was as if they expected to be used. As if they had always been hers.
No, no, no.
She said under her breath, and the words sounded thin and breathless, swallowed by the room.
This is not happening. This is not happening.
But even as she said it, the worst of the changes began to gather in her head. It started as a pressure behind her cheeks and around her scalp, a full, pushing sensation that made her wince and clamp those oversized hands to the sides of her face.
Ah. No, no, not my face.
Her voice trembled.
Please, anything but my face.
She squeezed her eyes shut. The shape beneath them was changing fast. Her head seemed to widen and soften at the corners, no longer fitting the familiar oval shape she had spent her entire life unknowingly trusting. It was becoming broader, rounder, squarer without ever turning hard-edged, as if it were being pressed gently into a new form.
Please don't take my face.
She whispered, and there was something heartbreakingly small in the way she said it. The beige fur spread across her head, replacing the last traces of normal skin. Then she felt her hair falling off. Gabby froze.
No.
She reached up, hands shaking.
No, no, my hair.
Strands slipped through her fingers.
Come back.
She whispered desperately.
Please come back.
They didn't, instead extra fur pushed out over her forehead and along her cheeks, framing her face in little crafted wisps. Her ears and nose then shrunk into her head until they were completely gone, though she could still hear and smell just fine. Her teeth sharpened and her lips became thinner, looking more like they were drawn on. She froze.
My mouth feels wrong.
A warm blush bloomed under both eyes, light yellow-orange and soft as brushed pigment. Then came the freckles, appearing one after another with surreal delicacy, blue speckled above the blush on one side, red on the other. Gabby froze as she felt them settle into place, because that was the first moment the transformation stopped feeling random. There was intent in those details. Design. Character. She was not just changing. She was becoming something specific, something finished. Her eyes burned next, and she stumbled toward the dark TV screen on instinct, desperate to see what was happening before it went any further. What looked back at her there was enough to knock the breath from her lungs. Her eyes were enormous now, far larger than any real person's, with thick white sclera framing black pupils so dark and clean they looked inked in and are even eyelashless now. Worse still, they did not sit quite straight. There was a slight, unmistakable misalignment to them, enough to make her reflection look innocently dazed in a way that would have been cute on a cartoon and deeply unsettling on her. Gabby flinched back from the screen as if the image might reach out and touch her. Her face no longer belonged to any category she understood. It was not monstrous, not ugly, not even grotesque. That almost made it worse. It was soft, bright, friendly-looking, the kind of face meant to make children smile. Her mouth still worked, but it had simplified too, losing some subtle human shape in favor of a cleaner, more expressive little curve.
I look like a cartoon.
She whispered.
I look like something made for kids.
Her stomach twisted.
Why would I look like that?
She looked as though she had stepped out of the cover of a forgotten children's VHS line, all rounded features and impossible colors and harmless charm. The sheer wrongness of that nearly sent her spiraling again. But through it all, she still did not understand what she was becoming. There was no name in her head yet, no sudden click of recognition, just the sickening certainty that the changes were not random and the even worse certainty that somewhere, somehow, this shape meant something. She had seen enough old media in her life to feel that much. There was a language to character design, and her body was speaking it now with alarming fluency. The striped knees. The mismatched hands. The huge eyes. The crafted softness. It all belonged together too neatly to be accidental. Gabby backed away from the TV until her legs hit the couch and she almost sat down by mistake. Her long black arms dragged across the floor behind her with a soft whispering sound, curling and flexing at the ends whenever she jerked them. The colorful mist still floated through the apartment in thinning ribbons, and now that the panic was no longer peaking at quite the same unbearable height, she could feel something else beneath it, an awful, creeping drowsiness. The sweet smell in the air was getting to her, or maybe it was coming from her now too, woven into the new softness of her body. Her limbs felt warm. Heavy. Not numb, but settled, as if whatever force had changed her was trying to tuck her into itself afterward. She sank down onto the floor because standing no longer seemed worth the effort. The carpet scratched faintly under her legs, and one of her giant hands landed in her lap while the other lay stretched out absurdly far to her side like it belonged to someone sprawled next to her. Gabby stared at them both, then down at her light yellow-orange torso, then up once more at the mute black mirror of the television.
What the hell am I supposed to do now? What will everyone think of me now? Will I be stuck like this forever?
She whispered, and the question hung in the apartment without answer. She thought of her old life in one raw, miserable flash, the rejected applications, the sagging couch, the stack of childhood tapes, the humiliating stillness of her days, and for a second it all felt impossibly distant, like it already belonged to somebody else. That frightened her enough to make her try to stand again, and there was something heartbreakingly small in the way she said it.
I'm still me.
She said weakly, as if saying it could anchor her.
I'm still Gabby. I'm still.
But the effort died halfway through. She was too tired. The room felt too warm. The mist had thinned to a haze, and the scent of sugar and something gently toasty still clung to the air, making her eyelids heavier with every breath. Maybe this was shock. Maybe she was hallucinating. Maybe she would wake up in 10 minutes on the floor with the tape halfway spit out of the VCR and laugh at herself for losing it. She wanted that explanation badly enough to lean on it, even though some part of her already knew this was not the kind of thing waking up fixed. So Gabby let herself lower fully onto the carpet. Her new arms pulled around her in loose dark curves, far too long, far too strange, yet already beginning to feel treacherously natural when she stopped resisting them. The ceiling above her looked the same as ever, cracked and stained and slightly crooked, and that ordinary ugliness was strangely comforting in the middle of everything else.
Okay.
She whispered to herself.
Okay. Ceiling's still there. Apartment's still here. I'm still here.
She fixed her eyes on it and tried to hold onto that, onto the apartment, onto herself, onto the certainty that she was still Gabby no matter what shape her body had been twisted into. But the sweet warmth in the room kept pressing gently at the edges of her mind, and her body felt softer and heavier by the second, like it had finally reached the form it had been meant to settle into. Her breathing slowed. Her thoughts blurred. She was still frightened, still horribly confused, still nowhere near ready to accept what had happened, but exhaustion was overtaking all of it.
Please.
She whispered to no one.
Please let this be a dream.
The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was the dark TV screen reflecting a beige, round-headed stranger back at her, and the last thing she thought before sleep took her was not who am I becoming, but please let this be a dream. Gabby expected to wake up on the floor of her apartment with a crick in her neck and carpet marks on her cheek. She expected the same miserable little details she had fallen asleep with, the heater making that dry, uneven rattle from across the room, the sink in the kitchen dripping at its own stubborn pace, the air carrying that familiar mix of dust, old electronics, and the faint plasticky smell of VHS cases stacked too long in one place. Instead, what met her was softness. Real softness. The kind that gave under her weight without sagging, warm without being stuffy, clean in a way that felt almost suspicious. For several seconds she kept her eyes closed, too disoriented to trust anything she was feeling. The surface beneath her was padded and quilted, not rough carpet. Her body didn't ache the way it should have after passing out on the floor. There was no cold creeping up from below. Even the air smelled wrong. Not bad, not threatening, but wrong all the same: paper, fresh paint, fabric, and something sweet and dry, like the inside of a craft store that had somehow never been touched by dust or clutter. That smell alone was enough to make fear come back in a thin, sharp line. When Gabby finally opened her eyes, the first thing she understood was that this was not her apartment. The second thing she understood was that whoever had designed this room had done it with the sort of deliberate cheerfulness that made her skin crawl. The walls were made of pastel panels arranged so neatly they almost looked hand-cut, decorated with painted swirls, cutout stars, and soft little clouds that should have felt theatrical or fake but somehow didn't. A shelf along one wall held handmade toys and little crafted decorations, paper flowers, button-eyed dolls, wooden animals painted in bright colors, yarn stars with stitched-on smiles. Framed doodles were pinned up in crooked rows as if someone had made them lovingly and refused to replace them with anything tidier. The bed beneath her was round and overstuffed, stitched from different fabrics like a giant patchwork nest. The whole room looked like it belonged on the set of an old children's show, except it didn't feel like a set. It felt used. Lived in. Loved. That made it worse. Gabby sat up too quickly, and the movement sent a wave of dread through her before she had even fully registered why. Something heavy and flexible dragged across the quilt with a soft scraping sound. She looked down and there they were again, those huge mismatched hands, one bright blue along one side with red claws, the other red with blue claws, both far too large and rounded to belong to any human being. Her chest tightened as she took in the rest of herself in quick, panicked pieces. Beige body. Light yellow-orange torso. Stripes around the knees and ankles. Little tufts of fluff around her neck. The same impossible form she had collapsed with on the floor of her apartment had followed her here intact.
No.
She whispered. Her eyes flicked around the room as if some hidden corner might suddenly reveal the stained counter of her kitchen, the stack of tapes by the TV, the VCR with that cursed cassette still sticking out of it. There was nothing. No couch. No CRT television. No old apartment smell. No evidence that her old life had existed anywhere outside her own head. She got off the bed in a clumsy rush and almost regretted it immediately. Her legs still felt wrong under her, too springy, too simplified, and her balance was thrown off by the unfamiliar size and weight of her hands and the strange, loose length of her arms. She stumbled, caught herself awkwardly, and froze at how naturally those new limbs adjusted to save her from falling. The floor under her feet was smooth and slightly springy, like painted wood made to look comforting instead of polished. Even that felt too intentional. Everything in this room seemed built to be gentle. Built to reassure. Built, somehow, for her, or for whoever she was supposed to be now.
No, no, no.
She muttered, turning in place as if movement alone might snap something back into alignment. But the room stayed where it was, bright and still and impossible. There was a mirror on the far wall, its frame decorated with painted popsicle sticks and little paper stars, and Gabby knew she shouldn't go to it. She knew there was nothing in it she hadn't already seen reflected in the dead black screen of her TV before she passed out. Still, she found herself drifting toward it anyway, drawn by that awful human need to confirm a nightmare with her own eyes. The figure staring back at her was exactly as terrible and harmless as before, rounded square head, tufts of fluff on the forehead and cheeks, yellow-orange blush under huge eyes, blue freckles on the left side, red on the right, the gaze slightly crossed in a way that would have looked adorable if it hadn't been her face doing it. Long black arms hung like thick cords from narrow shoulders, ending in those absurd colorful hands. The whole thing looked less like a creature and more like a character, designed to be friendly from every angle. And then, Before she could stop it, a name floated up in her mind with such ease that it felt like it had been waiting there all along. Goob. She recoiled from the mirror as if the glass itself had whispered it.
No.
She said again, louder this time, trying to pin herself down with force alone.
I'm Gabby.
But saying the name did not have the effect she wanted. It did not lock her back into herself or push the other one away. It just hung there awkwardly in the air, not false, but strangely far off, as if she had reached for a coat she used to wear every day and found it didn't fit across the shoulders anymore. That scared her more than the mirror had. Gabby pressed both hands to the sides of her head and squeezed her eyes shut. Her apartment. She had to hold on to the apartment. The peeling wallpaper. The sink that never stopped dripping. The boxes of tapes. The cheap microwave with the blinking 12 she never fixed. The old children's movies she watched when she needed to feel like something still belonged to her. She forced herself to picture the tapes in detail: cracked Disney clamshells, faded Don Bluth labels, tapes of Pokemon, SpongeBob, Tom and Jerry, Arthur, Rugrats, Scooby-Doo, Powerpuff Girls, Thomas and Wallace and Gromit. For one shaky second, relief flared inside her. She could still see them. She could still feel the edge of a cassette in her hands. She could still remember the click of feeding one into the VCR. Good. Good. That meant she was still herself. Then she heard footsteps outside the room. They were light and quick and slightly uneven, close enough to be real, and Gabby snapped around so hard that one of her long arms swung out behind her. Only then did she notice the door, disguised so neatly in the patchwork wall that she had missed it before. She backed up on instinct, gathering her two long arms close to her sides as if that might make her less visible. The footsteps stopped. There was a gentle knock, 3 soft taps in a row. Gabby's whole body locked. The knob turned. The door opened inward. The figure who stepped inside was yellow and cat-like, but in the same crafted, stylized way Gabby herself had become. Her head was hexagonal, her ears pointed and folded down the middle, and her white dress looked like an upside-down cupcake liner. A thin yellow tail poked through the back, ending in a magenta cup-shaped tip edged with white. Her paws were round and salmon-colored, each finger tipped with a careful little magenta claw. Her eyes were marked by 2 neat vertical magenta lines. It was right there on her face anyway, concern first, then immediate relief.
Oh,
She said, brightening in an instant.
you're awake.
Something in Gabby reacted before thought could get there. The feeling hit her hard and fast enough to make her dizzy: warmth, recognition, trust, a sense of safety so immediate it almost hurt. She hated it on sight because it didn't belong to her. It had not been earned. It was the sort of emotional certainty that should have taken years of living beside someone, and yet it surged through her as naturally as a reflex. The yellow girl crossed the room in 2 quick steps and stopped close, though not so close as to crowd her.
I was getting worried.
She said, her voice softening.
You slept way longer than usual.
Gabby could only stare. She knew this person. She knew her deeply, the way you know the shape of a voice before you know the words. But she did not know how she knew her, and that split between feeling and understanding made panic rise all over again. The girl tilted her head.
Goob.
She asked. The name landed harder this time. Gabby flinched.
I'm not.
She started, but the words caught before she could force them into anything useful. The other girl's expression changed in a tiny way, not dramatic pain, just a little puzzled hurt.
Not what?
She asked. Gabby opened her mouth and tried to say her own name. Gabby. It should have been simple. Instead it felt snagged on something inside her. Pressure built behind her eyes. Her thoughts tangled. The room suddenly felt too warm, too bright, too close, while in the middle of that rising panic another truth pushed in, soft and certain and impossible to ignore: this room was not foreign. It was familiar. Worse, it felt personal. Not hers. His. No, hers. No, his. The pronoun itself slipping sent a bolt of terror through her so sharp that she jerked backward, and one of those long black arms knocked into the shelf beside her. A small wooden animal toppled off and hit the floor with a clatter.
Oh, careful.
The yellow girl gasped, crouching immediately to pick it up. She handled the toy with easy familiarity, checking it over before setting it back in place with a relieved little smile.
It's okay.
She said gently.
Nothing broke.
Gabby just stared at her. That movement. That voice. A name surfaced in her mind so cleanly it made her feel sick. Scraps. And the moment the name appeared, it brought a flood with it. Glue on fingertips. Shared tables cluttered with scraps of paper and ribbon. The feeling of trailing after someone older and cooler and brighter than you, desperate to be included. Holding up some messy handmade project and waiting for praise. Getting squeezed in a quick proud hug. Hearing affectionate scolding after knocking something over in excitement. The simple, bone-deep comfort of being near her. Gabby took another shaky step back, horror spreading through her chest like cold water.
No.
She whispered, but there was no force in it anymore. Scraps straightened slowly, her ears dipping.
Goob.
She said again, quieter this time. He hated when she sounded worried. The thought slid into place without resistance, complete and natural. Gabby's heart lurched so violently it almost hurt. No. Not he. She. She hated, except even correcting it took effort now, like trying to push a heavy door closed against something leaning from the other side. Scraps took one careful step closer.
Did you have a bad dream?
She asked. Gabby wanted to say yes. She wanted to explain everything, wanted to blurt out that she didn't belong here, that she had an apartment and a VCR and a small, unhappy life somewhere else, and that all of this had been forced onto her. But the words refused to line up properly. Even inside her own head, the old life had started to flatten out, becoming a list of facts without the weight that should have come attached to them. Unemployed. Alone. Sad. Watches old tapes to feel better. Those things were still there, but they sounded less like memory and more like a summary of someone she had once read about.
Hey.
Scraps murmured, close enough now that Gabby, he could feel the warmth coming off her.
You're shaking.
He looked down and saw that she was right. Both of his big mismatched hands were trembling. Before he could pull away, Scraps placed one soft paw lightly over the blue one. The contact was immediate and devastating. It grounded him in a way that no part of his old life had managed to in months. Not because of magic, or not only because of magic, but because the feeling was familiar in that painful, ancient way that tells you some part of yourself has been waiting to return to this exact place. It did not feel new. It felt restored. He hated that. He hated how much it cut through the panic. For a split second he felt himself sliding internally, as if his memories had been lifted like a deck of cards and were being reshuffled by invisible hands. The apartment flashed in front of him in broken images, the couch with the split seam, the microwave clock, the unpaid bills, the rows of worn tapes, his own face reflected in the blank TV screen. But then a worse question rose up and knocked the air out of him. What had that face looked like? What had his voice, sounded like before? He reached frantically for those details and found them blurring under interference. Goob laughing too loud in a hallway. Goob racing around corners with his long arms trailing behind him. Goob squeezing Scraps in crushing hugs. Goob grinning so wide his cheeks hurt because everyone else was grinning too. Goob. 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 The name pounded through him, not like an intrusion anymore, but like something underneath everything else finally surfacing.
Please don't cry.
Scraps said softly, and only then did he realize tears were running down his face.
I don't.
He began, then stopped cold. The voice that came out felt right in a way that terrified him. Not just the sound of it, but the shape of the sentence forming in his mouth. He had almost said, I don't know what's happening to me. Not to her. To me. He stared at Scraps in open fear. She took his other hand too, careful of her claws, and held both gently.
It's okay.
She said.
You're okay. You're safe. I'm right here.
Safe. That word broke something in him because it hit a hollow he had stopped admitting existed. Gabby had not felt safe in a very long time. Not in the apartment. Not in the weeks of silence after interviews. Not in the creeping suspicion that her life had narrowed down to loneliness and waiting. But here there was color, warmth, a person looking at him as if he mattered and always had. He hated how badly he wanted to give in to that. Hated how easy it would be to stop fighting and let this brighter, softer world take him in.
He
said weakly. He meant to say Gabby. He knew he meant to say Gabby. But what came out was
Goob.
Scrap's expression softened at once, relief washing through her so openly that he could see it happen.
There you are.
She whispered. Those words should have horrified him. Instead they slipped into him with the awful, perfect feeling of a key turning in a lock. Dizzy warmth washed over him. The room sharpened while the memory of the apartment dulled at the edges. He could still remember it, but it no longer felt immediate, no longer felt inhabited. It was starting to seem like the setting of a dream he had woken up from and didn't want to revisit. Its details began to peel away. First the exact color of the wallpaper vanished. Then the layout of the kitchen blurred. Then the names of some of the movies and shows he had loved slipped loose and drifted out of reach. He knew they had mattered, but the reasons were thinning so fast he could barely grasp them. Scraps brushed a tear from beneath one eye.
You really scared me.
She said.
You were so out of it yesterday. I thought maybe you'd gotten sick or stayed up too late again.
Yesterday. Of course there had been a yesterday here. That thought no longer felt absurd. It felt obvious. There had been many yesterdays here. His room. His bed. His crafts. His sister. His sister. The phrase settled inside him with crushing rightness. Scraps was his older sister. Careful, clever, creative Scraps, the person he admired most in the world, the person whose approval made everything feel bigger and brighter. Somewhere deep down, the last stubborn part of Gabby recoiled and tried to protest. No, she thought desperately. That's not true. I lived alone. I had no sister. I watched tapes. I applied for jobs. Before that but when she reached any further back than that, there was nothing solid to grab. Her last name was gone. The age of the building was gone. The exact sound of her television turning on was gone. Even the outline of her mother's face, if she had ever held it clearly at all, had already blurred into nothing.
No,
he whispered, but there was barely any meaning left behind the word. Scraps leaned forward and pressed her forehead gently against his. The gesture was so familiar that his knees almost gave way.
You don't have to think so hard.
She murmured.
Come on. Just breathe.
And he did. He obeyed before he even meant to. In. Out. In. Out. With each breath the panic thinned, and the world around him settled more firmly into place. He noticed the little paper flowers taped onto one corner of the mirror because Scraps had said it looked plain without them. He noticed the hanging stars overhead and the crayon drawing beside the bed, the one with the glittery sun and the two of them smiling beneath it. And then, to his horror and relief all at once, he did not merely see those things, he remembered them. Actually remembered them. He remembered gluing that drawing together. He remembered getting his finger stuck and laughing so hard Scraps had rolled her eyes while trying not to smile. The memory did not feel inserted. It felt alive. He let out a tiny, shaky laugh before he meant to, and Scraps smiled at once.
There you go,
she said softly. Something loosened in his chest. Something final. He tried one last time to picture the apartment and all he got was a dim gray room with no weight to it, like a dream set abandoned after filming. Then even that faded. In its place was home. Not a concept. Not an argument. A certainty. Patchwork bedding. Painted walls. The smell of paper and fabric and pastel dust. A bright handcrafted world where things were made with care and kept because they were loved. This was home. It had always been home. The thought no longer frightened him. It fit too well. Why had he been so upset? A bad dream, he thought vaguely. That was all. A strange, gray, lonely dream that was already falling apart every time he tried to think about it. He reached after a name that still seemed important. Gah! Goo! But it dissolved before he could finish it. Scraps squeezed his hands.
Feeling better?
She asked. He looked at her properly then. The folded ears. The cupcake liner dress. The tail with its little cup-shaped tip. The careful claws. The worried, affectionate face. His sister. His big sister.
Yeah,
He said, and his voice came out quiet but steady.
I think so.
Her face brightened immediately.
Oh, good.
Without thinking, he lunged forward and wrapped both of his long arms around her in a huge, instinctive hug. It was so immediate and wholehearted that it made her squeak.
There he is.
Scraps laughed, hugging him back as best she could.
That's my little brother.
Little brother. The words settled over him with no friction at all. Not like a costume. Not like a role being assigned. Like the truth. He was Goob. He had always been Goob. He liked hugs. He liked making things. He liked being around people, joining in, getting excited, helping even when he got distracted. He liked bright colors and silly fun and the warm rush of being included. He was kind. He was cheerful. He was loved. For one final instant, something faint stirred at the very bottom of him, a girl on a couch, a stack of tapes, a life made mostly of silence. He paused. The image was thin now, almost transparent. Scraps noticed at once.
What is it?
She asked. Goob blinked, then smiled and shook his head.
Nothing.
He said. And this time it was true. Whatever the dim gray dream had been, it no longer hurt. It no longer even felt attached to a person. Scraps pulled back just enough to tap him on the forehead fluff with one clawed finger.
Good.
She said.
Then come on. I made something in the kitchen.
Goob smiled.
Sweet, I love you, sis.
Scraps replied.
I love you too, little brother.
He laughed then, bright and easy and completely real, and followed her toward the door with his long black arms swinging behind him. He paused only once to glance back into the room. His room. No dread stirred. No second life lurked in the corners. There was only this place, this home, this soft bright world that had always had a space shaped exactly for him. And as he hurried after Scraps, already talking over her about breakfast and what they should do later, the last trace of Gabby disappeared so completely that no one, not even Goob himself, would ever have guessed she had once existed at all. He bounded out into the hall with warmth in his chest, laughter already bubbling up again, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was nothing missing. And Goob was a happy little tune.